So the question that Ivan asked was essentially, um, when is it appropriate to sort of apply the change model, as Dhammarato puts it, of changing unwholesome into wholesome, which is noble right effort, right, on the Noble Eightfold Path. And when is it appropriate just to accept the conditions that have arisen and see what happens, essentially? And my initial response to that is it depends how far downstream you are, right? You could think of dependent origination like a river, essentially, of causes and conditions, and there's different points in that process of unfolding that you have some agency over, and then there's other points that you don't have any agency over. It's just nature, right? So once you've crossed the threshold of birth, at that point, I would say that's where you sort of just accept the state that's arisen, and you see that it's arisen. You know that it's arisen. You know it as it persists, and you know it as it passes away. You apply the perception of impermanence to that. And relating that to anapanasati, um, anapanasati, as the Buddha taught it, as Dhammarato teaches it to us, it's an exploration of the four foundations of mindfulness. The four foundations of mindfulness, just like the five aggregates, are just frameworks that the Buddha offered us for understanding the different facets of our experience, right? So we can understand our experience as form, feeling, perception, thinking, and consciousness, or we can understand our experience as form, feeling, mental states, and objects of mind in the four foundations of mindfulness. But what I want to bring your attention to in relation to this question is that fourth tetrad of anapanasati. That's sort of the liberation tetrad, right? So in the first tetrad, we get to know the physical body, we get to know form, and we get to know that the fundamental sankhara, which is the conditioner, the fundamental conditioner for the body, is the breath, right? So the physical body, with all of its many processes, stands shakily upon the breath. Nothing in the body can exist without the foundation of the breath. If the breath ceases, the body ceases. And then the foundation of feeling stands upon the body itself, right? Feeling arises from the body. We can think of feeling as sensation. They have a co-conditioning relationship with each other, the body and sensation or feeling. And then mental states arise dependent on patterns of feeling. And Dhammarato points out wisely that when we look at that third tetrad of anapanasati of mental states, we can think of that also as having a relationship to our attitude. And when we understand that third section of anapanasati as states of mind or moods, we can think of it. Most often, we see that feeling conditions our moods, right? Our moods or our attitudes are conditioned by our feelings. But when we understand that that relationship is there, we can flip it around and we can make it so that the attitude then conditions our feelings. That's further downstream, right? If we have an attitude or that second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, that samma sankappa, which is right attitude, right inclination, right, is translated differently, but it's the leaning of the mind. And the Buddha says that that right attitude is to have the mind leaning towards renunciation, leaning towards letting go, leaning towards nibbana. So that's a mind that inclines towards letting things go. To illustrate that, you can have a person that tends to get offended really easily. That's a person whose mind leans towards clinging, right? Or you can have a person who leans towards letting go. That's somebody who wouldn't get offended really easily. They drop things very easily. If they get angry, they drop it really easily. That's a person whose mind leans towards letting go. So when you focus on having that right attitude, then the attitude then conditions the feelings. So depression could arise, anxiety could arise, anger could arise, frustration, judgment, whatever mental state may arise. But if that precondition of having that right attitude that's inclining towards letting go is there, then that's going to condition the feelings, because no matter what arises, the mind is going to because it's the way that Dhammarato once said is like attitude is in engineering is like the leaning of a building, right? So the right attitude of a building should be perfectly perpendicular to the ground, then it's balanced and it won't fall over. But if it has the wrong attitude, then an earthquake or a gust of wind, perhaps, I don't know too much about engineering, could make the building fall over. So the right attitude would be perfectly perpendicular. And it's the same thing with the mind, except in the case of the mind, the right attitude is to actually have a leaning towards letting go, so that if depression arises, if anxiety arises, if anger arises, if negative thinking arises, the mind falls into a satisfied state because it's already leaning in that direction. So that's going further downstream, right? That right inclination, that right attitude, that right leaning in the mind. If you're already, as we were taught here in this Sangha, to keep the mind inclining towards satisfaction, that everything is already okay exactly as it is, no matter what arises. Some things I have control over, some things I don't. I'm going to sort of fall into a state of satisfaction no matter what arises. Then that attitude makes it so that it's almost impossible to suffer, right? Um, but going further downstream, because if we're looking at dependent origination, if you have that right inclination, that right attitude, then right at that point of craving, which follows feeling, so you got contact, and then you have feeling, and then you have craving, which is the emotional response to feeling. Right there at craving, the mind falls into satisfaction, and the rest of dependent origination sort of just falls apart after that. You don't ever really, it doesn't really go into clinging, existence, and dukkha and all that stuff, birth and dukkha. But let's say, the mind is functioning as it normally does, which is it's constantly going into birth and birth and birth and birth and birth. These different mental states are constantly arising. Um, then that fourth tetrad of Anapanasati is the whole path, really, right? So the 13th step, the first step of the fourth tetrad is the perception of impermanence. And the perception of impermanence is, when it's full and complete, it's seeing that this dynamic process is always constantly unfolding, right? That the mind is constantly fluctuating between positive and negative and neutral states of mind, positive and negative and neutral thoughts, positive and negative and neutral feelings, positive and negative and neutral perceptions, whatever, agreeable and disagreeable are constantly unfolding. And in the practice of anapanasati, even the jhana states are changing. Going from worldly states of mind to jhanic states of mind are changing. The breath is changing. The feelings are changing. The mental states are changing. So when you get to that 13th step, which is the first step of the fourth tetrad of anapanasati, you're contemplating that the fact that everything is part of a dynamic process. And Ajahn Buddhadasa goes into this in great detail. He goes into 9 stages of insight that you can have, and it's nothing like the stages of insight, the Mahasi method. But he calls them the 9 das, the 9 eyes, that you can go into 9 sort of knowledges through impermanence. But I'm just going to stick with the basic 3 here, which is that the perception of impermanence leads directly to the perception of dukkha, which is, in this case, from the subjective standpoint, unsatisfactoriness. So when something is constantly changing, we know it can't satisfy us. A happy state of mind can't be permanently satisfying because it's going to pass. An unhappy and a disagreeable state of mind can't permanently disturb us because it's going to pass, and it also can't permanently satisfy us if we're satisfied by something like that. A neutral state of mind can't permanently satisfy us because it's changing, right? So we have anicca, which is that dynamic, impermanent fluctuation, right? And that leads into dukkha, the perception of dukkha, that unsatisfied. And then it also leads into anatta, which is not a doctrine about there's no self. That would be a position, an argument, right? It's a perception of the unownability of the 5 aggregates, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, essentially nature, the body mind, right? We don't own it. It's constantly changing. It's been habituated. It's been conditioned. It's arising and passing. And so the way that I like to express this is where I'm getting with this, right? The way that I like to express this, and you guys may have seen me write this many times, is I like to look at the aggregates in the same way that I look at bubbles or waves, right? Ajahn Chah actually uses this metaphor. The place of peace, the place of coolness is the shore on the island of Nibbana. You stand right where the waves crash and disband against the shore, right where they come up to your feet, but they don't touch your feet. So whatever, let's just use mental states here, right? So whatever mental state arises, you see it's arising, you see its persistence, you see it's crashing and disbanding, but where you stand at the perception of impermanence, because this is what Ajahn Chah talks about as the place of peace. When you stand in the perception of impermanence, you're standing in the place of freedom because the waves can't touch you. You're standing beyond where they can affect you. You're standing in this unaffectable, immovable space. So you see them arise, you see them persist, you see them disband, you see them go back out. We don't take waves personally. We know that they're impermanent. We know that they're conditioned. We know that they belong to nature. We don't take them personally. Our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our mental states are exactly the same way. So we have to see our thoughts, emotions, feelings, and mental states exactly as we see those waves coming and going. And that's the place of freedom, standing there at the shore where the waves arise, persist, and disband and fall back out. So that's that 13th step of Anapanasati, that perception of impermanence. And so when you see things through this deeply, when you see impermanence deeply enough, you develop the 14th insight in Anapanasati, which is dispassion. You lose your infatuation with the body-mind complex. You lose your infatuation with your thoughts. You become disenchanted by your thoughts, your perceptions, and your feelings. They no longer have meaning to you. They arise and they pass. And because passion or craving is the cause of clinging and existence, which is essentially the arising of self, the next stage, the 15th step of Anapanasati, would be the fading away or the cessation of clinging, right? All four modes of clinging: clinging to views, clinging to doctrines of self, clinging to sensuality, clinging to rites, rules, and rituals. You watch that fade away, and then that leads to a relinquishment, which is the 16th insight in Anapanasati, giving everything back to its rightful owner, but it also likes to say giving it all back to nature. He actually likes to say throwing it back to nature. You become sort of like, oh my God, I've been stealing all this crap my whole life. I've been taking possession of the body mind. I've been taking possession of the thoughts. I've been taking possession, and all of it belongs to nature. You throw it all back. And then that leads to the fruit of Anapanasati, which is knowledge and deliverance. Well, it goes through the 7 stages in the text of awakening, but eventually it leads to that fruit of knowledge and deliverance. So it really, really starts with that perception of impermanence if you're at that point in the process, right? So that's where you stand. You stand firmly in that perception of impermanence. Even going further back, you stand firmly in that right attitude, that inclining towards letting go, that inclining towards dispassion, disenchantment, cessation of clinging, relinquishment.
That's the textbook example.
I thought it was beautiful, Michael.
Yes. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. What I was sitting when Mikey unmuted his mic before I even got in the call, the thought I was letting go was fear of hell is never a good reason to do anything.
It's a good reason to not do things, right? Which is what most of the precepts are about. Generosity or dana is more about what we should do, and then the precepts are about what we should not do. And then when you become skillful in your daily life or the life that you believe in, like the someone that you believe you are, by practicing dana seriously, which includes good deeds and volunteering and donating your money, concerned with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, making merit. And then you know what you should do, and you do that more and more and more and more. You know what you shouldn't do according to the precepts. Now we can start talking about meditation. Because when you start to practice meditation seriously, it's not that you're going to become more relaxed. Ajahn Brahm is kind of tricking people in a nice way, in that he's trying to facilitate people to calm down and love themselves, and that's a tool that the Buddha gave us. But once you start to practice meditation seriously, you're going to go basically insane, or you're going to realize that you're insane. And so, like the 10-day Goenka retreats, many people have committed suicide after those retreats.
Yes, but that is, in my opinion, only in cases where you need the concept of hell in the first place, or need to be what I call bathed in the metaphysical chatter of.
But you do need that to start believing in cause and effect, because if you don't understand how real cause and effect is, then you won't live in accordance with cause and effect, right? You'll think it'll be a little bit
Yes,
better,
but
or
this
it'll be a little
is
bit
this.
worse, but it's going to be profoundly better.
Yes,
But you have
but
to be
this was my
prepared for it to
point to
get
a few
profoundly
weeks.
worse.
This is my point to a few weeks back, that if you just sit and observe for long enough, it will become evident to you, which is why people go to meditation retreats in the first place. And while I do agree that someone like a physicist cannot necessarily do something with that in a way that does anything for the concept of hell, it doesn't mean that they are ignorant to the concept of cause and effect entirely, if that
It
makes
That's a
may
quick
sense.
question.
it may bring you, just to say this, it may bring you to a belief in that by practicing meditation seriously, but it will not, it's most likely not going to bring you to becoming a stream enterer or joining the Arya Sangha. Because if that were the
I have a
case,
question.
then there would be tons of these enlightened people running around, and it's very
How
uncommon.
do you feel about the idea of fabrications of grandiosity?
Hold on a
Life
second.
is
Hold
grand
on a
enough
second.
as it is. It's like a mountain's grand. It's already grand.
Bante
There's nothing.
Varapanyo.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we don't get too abstract in our conversation. So I guess my question would be
Well, the
irrelevant, but
textbook
you
is
could just,
abstract.
It's
well,
only
The
hold on a
abstract
textbook
second.
if
is
you read it
abstract.
abstract. It's very
When I say
literal. The great
when I
story
say
is very
abstract,
literal,
what I
and
mean
Michael gave a
is,
very literal reading of it. It was beautiful.
okay, hold on a second. I just want to make sure that you two aren't continuing maybe an argument you guys started in a different call. That's what I was going to ask, because it seemed like there was like a backdrop to that. And I just want to make sure that whatever we
Yes, well,
discuss is helpful to everyone here. Okay, because
I
Imagine it,
try
because
and, yeah,
if we get into
imagine it being,
too much
yeah.
abstract
I
proliferation,
agree.
it's not going to be a
It's
benefit to
it's
anybody.
accidental, I think. There
I
comes a
think,
point, right, where Bante has a point.
Lion,
How do you have these conversations without the abstract, right? But you just did it, right? You just did it.
but Lion had a
Okay, here,
question, I
let
think a
me.
quaint and authentic question. Lion, and it's good if we can, I don't know if it was Lion, maybe it was someone else.
Yeah, maybe I think up Bante, you got here just a bit ago, and I was just responding to Ivan's question. So perhaps we can start with a new question, and then we'll all be on the same page since we're all here now. Do you guys want to try that out?
Okay,
Yeah.
Lion, you
Okay.
ready?
So Ivan, did I answer your question for you well enough?
Yes, yes. You really did answer my question, and even beyond that. So yeah, I feel really satisfied. Thank you. Like truly.
Okay, great. And then I'm gonna tap. So Lion, what's the name that you like to go by besides is it Lion
Let me
or
just change it in the Discord. Do you know? I just have my like Discord name, but not my actual name. I go by Anirudh, by the way.
Anirudh?
But yeah, I did not have a question though. I just accidentally
Oh,
unmuted.
okay. Oh,
Yeah.
I see. Okay. All right. So let's maybe start from like a shared space and like go on to another question. I will say, Bante, I've been on a few calls with you, and you're always bringing up the topic of dispassion and detachment, which is excellent. We were talking about that. So I think we're on the same page there. But people are at different levels of practice here. So I want to make sure that anybody who has very specific questions about where they are in their practice, or maybe some obstacles that they've come in contact with, has an opportunity to ask that question. So Ivan, we just covered yours. Is there anybody else who wanted to ask a question?
I just want to say that a lot of the confusion that comes up is thinking that the Dhamma is about pleasure. Like the Dhamma is about feeling good or feeling pleasure. And really, it's more than it's about pleasure. It's about having such an intense experience that you vomit. And so that intensity that we feel when we listen to the Dhamma talk, or when we have the real Dhamma sharing, that's not something to backtrack about. That's something to kind of step back and go along for the ride with mindfulness and detachment. Because if you really want to contact the Dhamma, you have to be ready to be in that kind of state of intensity, vulnerability, intimacy, where your intellectual grasping, it cannot really take root anymore. And that's how we really start to get onto the path seriously. And life will be that intense even if you don't concern yourself with Buddhism. So we should get more used to it, that intensity that we feel.
Yeah, the throwing up that you're mentioning is really a relief, because there's a sickness, and that throwing up is what's getting rid of whatever is in us that's making us sick.
That's beautiful.
I mean, the profundity of the Dhamma is self-evident. I mean, how many people do you know who can say that they live their days without worry, without anxiety, feeling fulfilled, not wanting something that they don't have, not waiting for some place in the future to arrive to, not arriving at the end of their life, looking back and realize that they spent their whole life stressed out, worrying about things, wanting something else, and missing every single moment. It's already just being present
Well, let
and
me answer that
satisfied
question.
with life as it
Only
is
arahants,
profound already.
only arahants, only arahants are in that state.
What question did you hear, Bante?
He said, who can imagine, like, who can be in that state? Who can be in that way of being? Only
Okay,
arahants.
right. I must have missed that. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's Ajahn Buddhadasa, who did a really good job of bringing the Dhamma into sort of a place where people living ordinary lives, and even monastics living monastic lives, could really make it function for them. When he spoke of an arahant and also Bhante Punyaji, these are two scholastic and practitioner monks who I respect for what they've accomplished in their conduct in their lives. They spoke of arahats as in two ways. One, the word arahat means somebody who has broken all bonds, right? Referring to the 10 fetters being broken. And then Ajahn Buddha also spoke of an arahat being one who is without enemies. Essentially what that comes down to as being a person who has absolutely no hangups, just to use an American idiom, right? A hangup is an attachment, a bond. And to be without enemies means that, as Dhammarato says, everything is okay, everyone is a friend. These are all mental phenomena, these bonds that we hold on to, our sense of enemy, our sense of the ideas about ourselves that hold us down. So everything that the Buddha taught really has the purpose of getting the mind to let go of whatever it's holding on to. And even something like the idea that only an arahat might experience, a deep enough sense of satisfaction can
A
end up
dropping
being
of the
just
10
another
fetters. Well, you
thing that
just
the
said an
mind holds on
arahant is
to.
the only one who can drop the 10 fetters. So that's what it is, right? You just said
Right.
that. You just
Bante,
said
Right.
for
So
from the
clear
position
for
of
clear
Buddhadasa.
audio, can you please let him finish? They're recording this. Can everyone finish their point before we move on to the next person? We're all very excited. It's okay.
All right. So yeah, I mean, it's totally fine. But my point is that instead of developing a mental image or conceptualizing what an arahat might be or what nibbana might be, we can focus instead on what exactly it is that we're holding on to that are preventing us from being happy and satisfied with the way things are right now, right? I mean, a fetter is an attachment, it's a hang-up, right? So having no attachments, no hang-ups means having no hang-ups, and nibbana means to cool off. So essentially, it's pretty ordinary, right? It's just to have no hang-ups and to be completely chill, right? We don't have to make it this big pie in the sky future thing that only certain people can have. After doing a certain amount of things, we can actually kind
Please
of
leave this
understand
light
it
on.
in our experience.
Please.
Anyway, does that ring true with anybody, or bring up any other questions you want to bring up? Having no hangups, being completely chill, being sort of unaffectable, unoffendable, what else do you need? Being satisfied with things as they are, right? There's lots of religions out there. There's lots of philosophies out there. Capitalism, Christianity, different forms of Buddhism that will tell you that there are certain types of people that you need to be, certain types of experiences that you need to have, certain places in the future that you need to arrive to, certain things that you need to do before you can be satisfied, right? But Buddhism actually is different. If you read the suttas, if you look at them clearly, if you look at them with clear eyes, you can see that everything really is just all the teachings that are not specifically dukkha, nirodha, are just different ways of convincing you to put everything down, to let it go, right? They're different perceptual tools to get you to let go of whatever it is that you're holding on to. And the idea that there's some big explosive experience in the future that you're supposed to get to after doing all of this work is just another thing that you're holding on to. That's something that Dhammarato does a good job getting through to us. And let's say that there is this big explosive thing in the future, but you're not going to get there through dissatisfaction. You're not going to get to complete satisfaction through dissatisfaction. You can only get to complete satisfaction through satisfaction, right? Beautiful in the beginning, being satisfied, beautiful in the middle, deeper satisfaction, beautiful in the end, complete satisfaction. But in either case, no matter how you look at it, it's all about seeing where dissatisfaction has arisen and letting that dissatisfaction go by being completely satisfied with things exactly as they are. Actually, I had an illustration of this that I wanted to share last week. I didn't get to because it kind of came up in the last 5 minutes. If you guys are open to seeing or hearing it.
Yeah, let's see it.
Okay, I guess I'll use this. All right, so the Buddha speaks of the 3 characteristics of existence, right? And the word that's used in Pali for existence is bhava, and to understand what existence is, to exist means to stand apart, right? So the sense of self is what existence refers to. It's the thing that feels like it's separate from everything else, right? And the Buddha speaks of the 3 characteristics of existence as being, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and the anatta, the impersonal nature, right? But there are actually 3 characteristics of nibbana, which are called the 3 doors to liberation. Does anybody know what those 3 characteristics or 3 doors to liberation are? What are the 3 sort of qualities of nibbana or nirvana?
Dante left too heckin' soon.
It's okay.
If I may try, I think it's as the extinguishment of attachment, feelings, desire. I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, nibbana by definition is the extinguishing of greed, hatred, and delusion. But there's said to be sort of 3 characteristics within experience that are the doorways into nibbana. One of them is signlessness. the other one is emptiness, and the third one is translated either as aimlessness or desirelessness. So I'll just use this as an example. What do you feel when you look at this? Like, what does this black surface elicit for you?
Not much.
A worry stone.
Okay, for Jonesy's mama, a worry stone, but I'm gonna go with Michael's response because it fits into my thesis here, so I'm gonna use that one. Right.
Sorry.
So I mean, it's just
Sorry.
a black surface. Okay, we'll just say it's just a black surface, or like, just like pretend I couldn't think of an object. It's so hard to find an object that is purely signless, purely empty, and purely desireless. All right, so most things in the world, like you look at your face in the mirror, you look at your car, you look at a coffee cup, they have signs and features. So a sign means it stands for something else. So it means that when you look at an object, it has meaning to you. It has memories and associations for you. It has feelings attached to it. It has meanings attached to it. So to be sightless means that there's no recognition. It doesn't refer to anything else. It's just what it is. Right? So a stop sign doesn't just tell you, it's not just what it is, it means to stop your car, right? A sign is something that stands for something else. So to be signless means it doesn't refer to anything else, right? So it's just what it is. So that's the first quality, the first of Nibbana, right? And the second one is emptiness, meaning that there's no sense of self attached to it, no sense of meaning attached to it. So last week I told Ivan, when he used the phrase about something getting under his skin, that when something gets under your skin, that tells you where your conceptual boundary of self is, right? If my neighbor, if the trucks park across the street, it doesn't bother me at all. But if the trucks, I'm speaking from my father's perspective here, if the trucks park in front of my house, why are they parking in front of my house, right? So my sense of self is all the way to the street line, beyond the sidewalk, right? I'm using my dad here, but anyway, or your views, the things that you like and dislike, right? The four modes of clinging: views, sensual pleasures, craving for existence, rights, rules, and rituals, what you think you should and shouldn't do, right? So that's emptiness, means that none of that is there. There's no boundary of self triggered when you, right? And then the last one is aimlessness or desirelessness. It means it elicits no desire. So these three doors of liberation, or these three characteristics of Nibbana, means that the Nibbana element in our experience elicits no desire, no intention, no meaning, no sense of self, no passion. So it's completely ever present, but it's completely invisible to us because it is so utterly uninspiring, right? So a lot of the practice is about creating dispassion towards everything that has meaning, that has self, that has desire attached to it, in order to abide in this space of complete sort of, I don't know, like calling neutrality is not right, but I guess the illustration I was trying to say is that what you feel towards this black surface is in the beginning what Nibbana actually is like in our present experience. So a lot of the teachings are about sort of releasing the mind from everything that it grasps and clings to, in order so that it can abide in things as they are, without this need to desire, to make meaning, to have passion, to have memories and associations with, right? It's signless, it's empty, it's desireless. That's why, even though it's always already present in our experience, it's completely invisible to us, because our entire sense of self, our entire sense of world, is built around things that have meaning, that have self, that have desire sort of attached to them. But what is that
This
really
is
amount
why
to? It really, it
This
really, it
is,
really just
I mean,
depends.
is this a Dhamma talk, or are we allowed to share?
Yeah,
Because we're
You
we're
going on for
actually
quite a
left
while
it
here.
a little too early. We could actually really use you to get what are the 3 states of nibbana? What are those 3 letting
the
goes?
Well,
the
no,
three characteristics of.
I
Go
wanted to
ahead.
point out about the dispassion, right? The like
Mhm.
importance of serious practice, serious renunciation, serious intensity, right? When you experience the intensity of grasping onto the body, when you experience the intensity of grasping onto the mind and how much suffering that is, that's how you learn to detach, or you learn the importance of dispassion. You can't believe in dispassion. You have to experience the unsatisfactoriness of nama and rupa, or name and form, or materiality and mentality, and then you are natural to dispassion. Believing in dispassion doesn't do anything for you except make you believe that you're more enlightened or you're more on the path. So you have to, this is kind of the system that the Buddha set up, right? You have to practice seriously. You have to
Mhm.
renounce. You have to go to serious long-term meditation retreat if you want to have success. And that's how you discover the true reasoning. So like the hillside hermitage, and I think also Buddhadasa is emphasizing like the true reasoning. You cannot reach that with logic or intellect because it's not about believing anything. The believing notion is a very American kind of Judeo-Christian thing, like we're trying to believe in the Buddha's teachings. It's to be seen for oneself. And you can only see for oneself if you look very closely, very deeply, very consistently. And to be able to do that, you need to let go of all the causes and conditions that are supporting you to keep grasping and keep revolving in this identity cycle and this pleasure seeking and pain avoidance cycle.
Michael tried using like a very nice black square to explain the concept, and I ruined it. Do you have like a more succinct kind of metaphysical version of that, of those
What's
words?
it about? What's it about?
Well, okay. Let's just I'm going to build on what you said, Bonte, because I think it's good what you said. Yeah, dispassion is a
Well,
very visceral, real
why
experience.
don't we do some progressive stack here and let's go down Jonesy's path here. What is Jonesy talking
Well,
about? What are they asking about particularly?
Nibbana, and Michael was trying to explain Nibbana and the 3 like gates you're supposed to go through of letting go.
What are
And he
those 3
was
gates?
That's what we're asking you. We imagine that you're the one
What's
that
the
could
name
give
of
us
them?
exactly what they are. Oh,
Well, I don't know what
Michael?
other
Sometimes,
people are imagining. I know what I'm imagining, and I'm
sometimes,
detaching from that.
sometimes
But
they're they're thought of as like 3 characteristics of Nibbana, or the 3 doors of liberation. I think is a more common expression that you might have heard. Um, and I think Jonesy wanted to know if you're familiar with them. The 3 doors of
what are
liberation. Have you
they?
heard?
What is the name of them? What is the 1, 2, 3 doors?
Yeah, signlessness, emptiness, and desirelessness or aimlessness.
Signlessness, I'm aware of. Signlessness is not someone, not some place, not some time, not some situation. That's also how we can, these are like the best determining factors for if someone is Arya Sangha or not, to varying degrees. So someone who is a Patujana, they do not have a relationship with signlessness. So certain signs will put them into a state of greed, anger, and delusion, and they will dwell in those states. Whereas Arya Sangha member, they continuously see the signlessness of signs again and
Mm-hmm.
again. So signlessness is a very important one to look at. And it means that every time that it's about someone, every time that it's about something, every time that it's about some situation, that's wrong. It's only
Mm-hmm.
right as much as you can detach from it. And that is the signlessness. But you can't convince yourself into that. If you do like that, you'll always be a follower or you'll be a false teacher. So you have to watch
Yeah.
out for the convincing about, because the Dhamma has nothing to do with like convincing. The only convincing in the Dhamma is more like a generosity of compassion or a generosity of wisdom. So we understand cause and effect, or we believe in cause and effect, and we experience that. So we teach people to practice dana and follow precepts. And then if they're serious about it, then they are in a position to receive the Dhamma because they're a human being. They have a better chance to be a human being if they follow precept and if they give dana. Then the human being can receive the Dhamma, then they can do with that as they like. What were the other two? Signlessness, emptiness.
Let me try to ground signlessness a little bit, because I think the object I was holding is a little too abstract. So if somebody insults you in your own language, like somebody calls you some names that really offend you, let's say in your own language, it's going to trigger an emotional reaction, right? But if somebody comes and yells insults at you in another language, it'll trigger no reaction, right? Because the sounds that the people are making in the other language have no point of reference in your mind. That's the experience of signlessness, right? The words have meanings in your language, but they don't have meaning in another language. They don't have any point of reference in your mind. So they have no sign. They don't stand for anything to you. So it's impossible to be affected by insults coming at you from another language. And then when it comes to emptiness as a door of liberation, it's that absence of taking things, that absence of self and the absence of disturbance dependent on. So, right, like the classic example is, if somebody is smashing up a car that's not yours, then it's not going to emotionally affect you. But if somebody is smashing up your car, it's going to emotionally affect you. So these doors of liberation are about seeing all things through signlessness, seeing all things through emptiness, and seeing all things through desirelessness, right? But as I was talking about that, I feel that there can be just a little too abstract. The point that I was trying to make is that the experience of dispassion, of nibbana, is very, very visceral and present right here, right now. And this is why I respect Dhammarato for bringing it always back to this whole idea that everything is already okay exactly as it is, because that's such a dispassionate way of thinking, right? You don't have this feeling of needing to add or take anything away from experience. And the point that I was trying to make there with Nibbana is that this experience exactly as it is already 100% complete. There's nothing missing. There's nothing that needs to be added. There's nothing that needs to be taken away. It's simply this change in attitude, because cravings really is a sort of attitude about the present experience. It's a judging of the present experience, of liking or disliking, wanting to get or get rid of. And when you're completely okay with things as they are, that's really the experience of dispassion. And this whole idea of these three characteristics of Nibbana is just to point out that these three things are always more present in our experience than everything else. They're just invisible to us. It's because it's not what we build our sense of self and our sense of world upon. That's the point that I was getting at. But I'm hoping that that's not too abstract for the conversation that we're having. So I'll leave it at that for now.
What was the third one after emptiness?
Yeah, the signlessness, emptiness, and then the last one is usually translated as like aimlessness or desirelessness or lack of intention.
Aimlessness, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. Lack of
Having no
intention.
aim.
Am I allowed to ask Bhante to make that less grounded? I'm curious what he thinks.
About aimlessness?
Yeah, anybody can ask
the other
they
two. The other two.
Okay, so for aimlessness,
both
yeah.
emptiness and aimlessness. Yeah.
Aimlessness still, they're all not separate. It's just like pointers,
I'm gonna keep
right?
my
Like
earpiece in, but I
fundamental
have to step away for
pointers.
just 1 second, okay?
So they're not separate from each other, right? Nibbana is just Nibbana. The truth is just the truth. Freedom is just freedom, right? But for aimlessness, it's like he was saying, they were saying, not having intention. So it's that where you are is already complete. So there's nowhere to go. The idea that there's somewhere to go or that there's something to do, etc., does not arise in the mind of the Nibbana mind. right? Now, there are basic need or something like that, but that is done with complete detachment or complete I don't disassociation seems to be like a Western psychological term, but complete detachment, complete untanglement, complete unbindedness concerned with anything. It's just like you have to pee, so you stand up instead of sit down, but that doesn't mean that you believe in the notion of a self.
We can use disidentification.
Disidentification, but that it's the, and this is a very important point. You cannot practice disidentification. The you that is already not is non-identification, right? And the emptiness kind of also relates to the signlessness, um, but it's maybe it's like yeah, maybe the emptiness. It's kind of like anything or everything is empty of something every time already. So the signlessness means that signs are signs of signlessness. So that someone is a sign of not someone. Something is a sign of not something. Some situation is a sign of not some situation. And then the emptiness is that there's no substance to any of that. Right? And this is kind of maybe relates a little bit to like Nagarjuna's four contradictions, which is an interesting principle, right? So it's like how you can say that it's like this, it's not like this, it is not like this, and it is not like this. I need to pull up the those things, but it's something like that, right?
No,
And
no,
that
no,
all of
no.
yeah.
You already made a beautiful point, I think, in the metaphysical way. It without in a very succinct way.
Well, as
Very
a
little
Patujana,
nonsense, even though you took it to a metaphysical place. It was gorgeous.
as a
Thank you.
Patujana, okay, as someone who doesn't get it right, what is right will be wrong. What is not metaphysical will be perceived as metaphysical. What is practical will be seen as not practical. What is not practical will be seen as practical. And so this is kind of the suffering of the Patujana, is that it's a constant state of desire. It's a constant state of delusion. That's why sometimes I will tell people, imagine if you were like in a state of schizophrenic psychosis all the time. So in some way, that's the seriousness of the situation. So some teachers, they say, look, you need to practice like your head is on fire, because it is. You are burning. You're burning with greed. You're burning with frustration. You're burning with delusion. Um, so we follow the Buddhist teachings. We put it into practice and keep our fingers crossed and concern ourselves with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. You know, because the Buddha wasn't an absolutist. The Buddha taught the true Dhamma, and he also created the container. And that's something maybe not enough people like look at, that the Buddha was real as much as someone can be real. And not only did he teach the true Dhamma about cessation, that all conditioned phenomena will come to an end, but he created a container of bhikshus, bhikshunis, lay people, right, to continue to, it's kind of like a muffin container. Like you have a plastic container and there's muffins inside. The intellectual, the philosophical, the structure of monasticism, all this stuff is like the container that the Buddha made. And then the muffin inside is the mind of the Buddha. So the mind of the Buddha is when the Dhamma ending age is when the muffin dissolves, or when the muffin is too rotten to eat anymore. The container may still be there. You may still have Buddhist monks. You may still have like Buddhist philosophy and Abhidhamma, right? But there will be no muffin inside anymore, or the muffin will be too rotten to eat. It will be finished. And then that's the like the next Buddha, the idea of Maitreya, or the next self-enlightened one, right?
That
Right.
sounded like a very gorgeous answer to the start of Ivan's question earlier. Thank you for dedicating yourself and like sacrificing completely to being able to say that to us.
Yes, thank you, Bante. I want to just make two quick points, and then I just want to kind of like throw it back to the other members here, just to make sure that we're not just getting into like a back and forth sort of conversation that is too far in the clouds or too rooted in textual knowledge. But just the only reason I'm going to mention this is because I want people here to kind of like be able to make use of what they hear here. But one, you know, cessation in the Dhamma refers to the cessation of craving and clinging. It doesn't refer to the cessation of phenomena. That's pretty clear in the suttas. And then the other point I wanted to make is that, you know, there's a pretty practical way that we experience this on a worldly level before it becomes completely global in our experience. But if anybody has ever been, like, let's say in a toxic relationship, I was just this example, even though I've been in a great relationship my whole life. But like, let's say you've been in a bad relationship with somebody, and the way the person looks, the way they speak to you, everything that they say to you just makes you just passionate for them. And then they're yours, right? You have all this desire and all of this possessiveness towards this person. So that's the desire, and that's the selfing, the non-emptiness, we'll say, that's keeping you, the clinging that's keeping you in the relationship. You know, in Buddhism, it's really the arising of right knowledge that gives rise to dispassion. So let's say like this person, you've thought like they're the love of your life, they're everything to you, you cling to them, you love them. And then one day you find out, let's say, they've been lying to you for 20 years, they have a whole nother family. Somebody says it to you, and like at first it makes you kind of waver, but you don't want to believe it, right? Because you're so attached, you're so in love. But then you actually see it for yourself. And then upon seeing it from yourself, you know, taking all of the other constituents out of the analogy, like you completely lose all your love for them and all of your sense of this is your person. You become completely dispassionate to them. When you see them on the street, they're no longer your person. They're no longer somebody you're in love with. No matter what they say or do, it doesn't have any effect on you. That's sort of the cessation of passion and identification that the Buddha refers to, that we develop towards all internal phenomena, right? That's how it's liberating, right? Because if you're in a toxic relationship, you're stuck in it. It's affecting you emotionally. It's affecting you in every way. But when you become completely dispassionate, when that person is no longer somebody that you have passion for, when that person is no longer somebody that you identify as you and as yours, then they no longer have an effect on you. So that's just a way of thinking about dispassion on that level. So I just wanted to say those two things, and then I wanted to see if we could try to see what some of the other members here in the call maybe want to talk about, like actual, just like, you know, just ordinary challenges in your practice that I can advise you on, because I don't want this to get to like Bhante is making a point about the Dhamma that's big and global, and then I'm making a point about the Dhamma, and then we're just going back and forth like that. I want to try to see if we can talk about things that can really help each person make progress or get past like a certain sort of threshold in their practice, if possible. I think that's the most useful thing we can do at this time.
I had a question, is not super related to anything we've really been talking about, but like specifically to my practice, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess like sometimes when I'm sitting down, there will be this, I don't know how to describe it. It's not a thought exactly, but it's just something that happens, and there will be a sensation on my body, usually something negative, like a kind of anxiety. And there will be the moment after that anxiety, there will be a thought that will be like, oh, like I just thought about some X event. That's why I had this sensation. But there's no memory of me thinking about that sensation. It's almost like it's like kind of a guess. Like I don't know if I'm fooling myself that I had that thought, but the thought is so subtle that I can't tell if I'm making it up or if it's real or not. I guess my way of approaching this is just that it doesn't really matter if it's real or not. It's just to treat it with satisfaction and just move past it. I guess wanted to hear your take on that.
I mean, go ahead, Michael.
I wasn't gonna say anything.
Oh, you look like you're. I mean, my inclination is towards the it doesn't matter, like you said. You know, if it's not affected you, you know what I mean? Like, really what matters is craving and clinging, you know?
Mm.
It's not that thoughts are subtle. Also, it's the subtlety isn't the thought itself, it's our attitude about the thought, whether or not it is subtle or a big giant monster that's scaring us into a corner. This is what changes what the thought is, but again, that's just our perception.
Wait, sorry, I didn't quite get that. You're saying the attitude towards the thought will change the thought itself, or?
In a way, yes, yeah. But yeah, just again to put it more clearly, if we have the thought, for example, like, oh, I'm hungry, you know, that thought might be, we might label that thought as very subtle, especially if we're really not that hungry, you know, like we ate this morning, whatever. It's like there's just this small little thought of I'm hungry, right? But as we, you know, if we decide, okay, well, I'm not going to eat for days and days, that thought of hunger will seem to grow into this like big scary thing of like, oh no, if I don't eat, I'm going to die type thoughts. But in reality, it's still the same core feeling / thought of, oh, I'm hungry, right? And again, that's just our attitude, basically. Whereas, like, if we really are hungry and we haven't eaten in a while, we don't have to, like, let that take control of us in an unwholesome way. You know, we can have the thought, oh, well, I'm hungry. I can, you know, I can go to the kitchen and make myself some food. I'll be okay.
Got it. Thank you, guys.
But yeah, I hear this a lot. In fact, I would almost say I hear it daily, is that the thoughts are subtle. And that's not the case, that the thoughts are subtle. The thoughts are just thoughts.
What does that really mean? The thoughts are subtle. I've never heard that before.
It's something I've heard a lot of practitioners and meditators say, you know, as they've gotten better at getting rid of the scarier or bigger thoughts that they come into contact with, they say, oh, now the dukkha is more subtle, you know, but in reality, the dukkha isn't more subtle. It's still just dukkha, right? It's just that their attitude about the dukkha has changed, and they've realized, oh yeah, I can get rid of this dukkha. It's not this thing that has to totally control and ruin and take over my life.
Yeah, I think a
Still
fun way to illustrate.
don't understand. It's like saying that their practice is getting better.
Well, people will sometimes say this when they have been practicing. You know, we'll say, like, you know, after they've kind of been doing it for a little while, they'll start to say that, oh, the dukkha is more subtle now.
Mm-hmm.
Like they'll say
I think
things
there's a
like,
good way
oh,
to.
it's in the back of the mind, or it's in the subconscious, or, you know. But yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I think a good way to illustrate the point that Michael's making is that we sort of misplace where the dukkha is and where the craving is, right? We think that it's sort of in the external conditions when it's an internal phenomena. Dukkha and craving are both totally internal phenomena. They're not at all in the external conditions, right? So here's the analogy I want to use here. You've heard the phrase "don't cry over spilled milk," right? You're in your mother's living room and there's a glass of milk on the coffee table, let's call it like a glass of like tomato juice, and she's got white carpet. And you accidentally knock over the glass of tomato juice and it spills on the carpet, just big giant red stain, and she's like, oh no, she's so mad. There's a lot of dukkha coming from her because she has this, like, she wants the carpet to stay white, and spilling of the red tomato juice really makes her angry, right? And then let's say, like, in another situation, you just put the glass down and just like a little bit of tomato juice splashes out, tiny bit of, and hits the carpet. She's like, ah, like, it's not really the amount of the tomato juice that matters. That's the external condition. It's your mom's attachment to not having tomato juice on her carpet, where the problem is. That's the craving. She does not want tomato juice on her carpet, and then because she doesn't want it when there is tomato juice on her carpet, then she has the dukkha that follows, that emotion, that pain and that emotional reaction. So it's always internal. You could have, so let's say your dad doesn't care. He has no attachment. It's signless. It's empty. No desire attached to tomato juice on the carpet, right? Big splash of tomato juice. I don't know why I'm making the dad superior here. Maybe because I'm a dad. But anyway, big splash of tomato juice goes, spills all over the carpet. He's like, oh, okay. Well, let's just get out the little steam cleaner and clean that up, A little tiny splash of tomato juice, steam cleaner, big splash, whatever it may be. The house goes on fire. He's totally cool. The dukkha, the craving in the dukkha is always internal. So so the point also I will say that Michael's making here is that thoughts, everything that belongs to the aggregates, thought, feeling, perception, thinking, these are all still objects of mind. They're all still objects of experience. They're still external to the Four Noble Truths in a way, just in a manner of speaking. They're still external to the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are really about sort of knowing the arising of dukkha and seeing its origin in craving and abandoning that craving, and then delighting and relishing in the cessation of that craving. Meaning, if previously I would have freaked out about tomato juice spilled on my carpet, I know that tomato juice is now spilled on the carpet, and here dukkha is arising because I don't want tomato juice on my carpet, but I can just abandon that desire to not have tomato juice on my carpet. I can be okay whether tomato juice is on or not on the carpet. I can totally be okay with it. And then that being okay with tomato juice being on or not on the carpet makes me feel all of this relief. And that relief is the cessation of that craving and clinging, right? And then I can feel good. I can feel great I can be okay with the tomato juice spilling on the carpet. And there's freedom in that. So that's that third noble truth of actually paying attention to how delightful it is to be free of craving and clinging and dukkha. Because if we miss that part, if we don't celebrate and delight in the fact that we can be free of craving and clinging and dukkha, craving, clinging, existence, and dukkha, if we want to get super technical, if we don't celebrate and relish it and realize it, as the Buddha says, that's our duty to the third noble truth, then it can go right past us. Then we only experience the passion and then the passion that is related to the dukkha and the craving. We don't experience the delight in the relief of being free of those things. But that's an internal difference. It doesn't have anything to do with external conditions. So whether you're having a lot of thoughts or tiny thoughts, that's not really the difference. It's whether or not you have craving and clinging and dukkha in relation to those little or big thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That was really well put.
Thank you both, Michaels, for the explanations. That was really helpful.
Okay, y'all, I'm going to end the recording for now, but please feel free to hang out and chill in Sangha if you'd like. But I think this has been a very worthwhile call.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael, for doing the recording.